Hello, everyone, and welcome back to A Cup of Coffee, the show to go with your morning cup of coffee. I'm Umar, and this is my co-host, Amaan.
Hey everyone. Without further ado, let's jump into our first section. What have we been thinking about this week, Umar?
Well, I've been thinking about traveling since ever since COVID-19 started. I haven't really done much moving around outside of my house, let alone travel anywhere. So I've been thinking about some of the places I've been over the years.
Mm-hmm. Where all have you been, actually?
I've been to quite a few places. I think I went to Spain a couple years ago. That was pretty amazing. I got to see a lot of interesting things. I went to Barcelona, Madrid, Alhambra, and I went to Granada. It was amazing. Like, first of all, the weather in Spain is really nice. It's not like England, especially London, where it's kind of gray and rainy all the time. Like, I enjoy that kind of weather,
Yeah.
but Spain has this nice Mediterranean sort of temperate, sunny and sunny sort of climate, and that makes vacationing there really fun. And why a lot of people call Spain sunny Spain because it is sunny.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so in Spain's got a lot of really good architecture. You have historical stuff like Alhambra, but then you go to Madrid and Barcelona, and you see a lot of these old cathedrals as well, and they're huge. They're huge, and they've got a lot of like spires and towers and stuff, and they're really impressive. And on top of that, I got to see a Barcelona game, so I got to see Messi play in person.
That's awesome. I think that was most definitely the highlight of your trip. Must have been.
I know it'd be like if you got to see Jordan play in Chicago.
Yeah. Oh man, I can't imagine.
I
That would
know,
just be the most amazing thing.
I know, like the goat is like 100 feet away from me. I got pretty good seats as well. We were behind the goal and like only a few seats away. It was amazing.
Oh my god, man, that sounds awesome.
I know. The atmosphere was amazing. Like it had like the whole stadium was chanting and stuff. Like you'd hear the whole stadium chanting like different chants at the beginning of the game, so you could hear the whole stadium singing and stamping their feet.
Oh my god, that's so awesome! Like that unison, just everyone all together. That sounds so amazing.
It's awesome. And then like there was a fight that happened like a few feet away between like opposite fans, and then like the seat like right next to me, like this guy would just like he was cursing the opposition players like the entire game, and then not only did he curse them in Spanish, he translated that into English as well.
Wow, that's dedication.
I was like, you know what? I mean, it's not great what you're doing, but I appreciate your dedication to it.
Yeah, that's so awesome, dude. Yeah, you meet all kinds of people at ball games. It's amazing. People get really into it.
Yeah, and the cuisine in Spain is pretty nice. You get a lot of Arab food there, but you also have like Spain has some interesting food like paella and stuff like that. So
Okay.
I got to try that. So it was a nice mix. So I think I think people don't really think of all the like Muslim like Moorish background that Spain had for the longest time when they go to Spain, but like that's really present, and you can see that in the fact that there's a decent amount of Arabs there,
Yeah.
and also because there's still like the Grand Mosque, and I think it was Granada,
Yeah.
like that. Like that's a cathedral now, but you can still see some of the influence. You can still see some of the parts that used to be a mosque.
Yeah, that's awesome, and the architecture from that time is just so beautiful.
I
Yeah,
know, and like it's interesting to see mosques that have been mosques or masjids that have been converted into cathedrals, because they have this interesting mix of architectures. Like you have like Islamic architecture, but you also have that sort of European sort of I don't know if it would be Gothic. I don't, but like
Yeah.
the European style architecture mixed in,
Hmm.
so it's sort of like a Frankenstein, sort of mixed between different things, and it doesn't
Yeah.
it doesn't really blend together, but like the way that it doesn't blend together is sort of charming in
Hmm.
and of itself.
That's interesting. I feel like you would have to see it to really understand what you mean there, and I hopefully will one day. That's Spain is definitely one of the places on my everlasting list of places I need to go.
Yeah.
Where else have you been? Where we've just been on this one country.
I've been to London. London is one of my favorite places in the universe.
That's awesome.
Just it's so diverse. I think that's one of my favorite things about it. There's people from everywhere. Like you have a pretty impressive Chinatown. There's so many brown people.
Yeah, that's
uh,
always nice.
like everywhere you go, you'll see people of every skin color and nationality, and it's really amazing. And that reflects in like the restaurants there because you have
That's
um,
exactly what I was gonna say. Is like
yeah,
well, the
because
more different kinds of people you have there, the more different kinds of food you have there.
yeah, like I think the best food I had was from this Turkish place called Bosphorus. Um,
Ooh,
yeah, so um, they actually had pictures from when famous soccer players would come and eat there. Like they had like pictures of
really?
like Frank Lampard who played for Chelsea and like Jermaine Defoe and stuff like that. So they had like really famous soccer players just pinned up on the wall where when they came to eat there. So that was really impressive, and I'm not
That's awesome.
surprised they ate there because that was some really good kebab.
That's yeah, dude. I bet I need to have like authentic Turkish food. I've had Turkish food at like a Turkish friend's house, but I've never had it like at a of course at a restaurant in London.
Yeah, I
But
mean, we don't really have many Turkish restaurants here. I think we got like one, and I don't think I've been there.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
well,
So and there's so much stuff to see in London. Like you have all the museums, which, by the way, pretty much I think all of them have like free entry. So it's
that's
amazing to
dope. Yeah,
yeah,
free museums are always awesome.
yeah, and because it's the British Museum, they did a pretty good job of stealing stuff from everywhere,
Yeah.
so it's pretty impressive.
Well, not stealing, because like they owned it. Like when they probably when they got it, they owned it. Maybe.
I mean, if I beat you up and take your stuff,
It's yours, man. You've rightfully claimed it, dude. If you can beat me up, you deserve it, bro. That's the rule.
I don't think that's how it works. But yeah, it's really impressive. And then they have some really nice art museums as well. But then you
Hmm.
have like the more touristy stuff, like you have a whole bunch of theaters as well for like plays and stuff. So you can see stuff like classics like Shrek the Musical.
That's awesome.
And also Shakespeare if you're into that trendy stuff.
Yeah, this Shakespeare too, but true art. uh,
Yeah, so those are pretty two I think of the more recent places I've been to. But what about yourself? I'm sure you're decently traveled as well. So let me know
I
about
am
some.
not actually. I've been to several places in America, and then if you count Canada as a separate entity, there's that too, and then Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, and those are my four countries. I had a 18-hour layover once in Bahrain, which was fun.
Yeah,
it was
I've
really
been
good
to
food
Bahrain
there.
once. Yeah,
Yeah, it was nice because my dad picked dates off of trees, like on his way home from the mosque, like that one day that we were there, and like just having the fresh dates was really nice.
nice.
But I wouldn't count that as somewhere that I've like been. Um, I've been yeah. So in America, I've been to like New York, and I haven't really been west, and I really want to, but maybe after this whole thing is over. I was thinking about going to the Grand Canyon as soon as this was all over, so that would be an interesting journey. Um, I'd say my favorite trips to the or Yeah, more recently. So last year in January, I went to Chicago, which was pretty awesome because it was just me and my brother. And
That's awesome.
yeah, so we were just kind of chilling, and we did that thing where like you just kind of aimlessly go to the city and go to like places that you're just like, okay, well this place seems cool, and you don't really have a plan when
I
you
think that's the best kind of
yeah
day trip to a place where you just sort of you have like a general idea of where you're gonna be, but just figure things out as
yeah
you go along. Like kind of like what we do when we go to the Dallas Arts District.
yeah exactly, and then we go get like some crappy Caribbean food because we're being spontaneous, and it ends up backfiring, but then the pies make up for it. We'll
Yeah.
tell you all about that story one day. And yeah, so it was just really fun because yeah, we go there, and we had this sushi, and I wish I could show you guys a picture. Maybe Brendan can edit it in later. I'll send you the picture. But it was this picture of like it was so my sushi had like the sauces arranged in a way where it's like a peacock that's made with the sauces. It looked so cool. And then there's like
Amazing.
sushi on the side. I had this like ice cream taco, which was really awesome. And then yeah, we were just going around and chilling. We went to Millennium Park. It was really fun, and just being there alone with my brother. It was like it was just it was just really fun because like I traveled there like alone for one of the first times, and it was a great trip. And then another great trip for me was probably New York because I love big cities, and
Yeah,
there's
New
just
York's amazing.
you always remember that trip. You know what I mean? Like everyone that's ever been to New York, they always have that like that feeling of New York whenever they're like there, and then whenever you think about it, you know exactly what I mean when I say like that New York feeling, because there's just a whole different vibe when you're there. And like
It's just sort of this like it feels like you're a part of something big and
yeah,
impressive. Like
yeah,
whenever you,
and the street food is amazing.
yeah, it's amazing. Like
It's so good. And then there's a lot of museums there. There's Times Square in and of itself at night is just standing there is all you need to do to truly appreciate it. And there's like tours and everything that you can go on. I mean, they have uptown, midtown, and downtown, and like that in and of it. It's just crazy. It's amazing to be over there. Have you been on top of Freedom Tower?
I don't think I have.
Oh my God, man. So when you go there, like you step into the elevator, and so like the in the elevator it's just screens around you, right? And so the
Hmm.
screens, they show the area that's around you in the city, but in like the late 1700s, right?
Oh, that's
And
amazing.
so it's just like flat land. And so as the elevator is going up, the years start to go up, right? So as you're going up, you start to see that land get developed until so like I went there probably in like 2016, right? So it goes up until like 2010 or something like that, and it shows you the city, and then you get to walk out and see like the current New York, like a full 360-degree view from the top of Freedom Tower. And it was just
Yeah.
so cool because you see like the history of how it grew, and then you get to see the whole city. And I thought that was one of the most amazing things when I was there. um, they really know
Yeah.
how to hype it up.
Yeah, New York definitely lives up to the hype. I think it's probably the big city to measure all other big cities against. Like
Hmm.
it's like the standard for big city. Like when someone thinks of big city, pretty much
New
everyone
York.
thinks of New York first.
Yeah, one thing I do regret is not listening to Empire State of Mind when I was there, because that song just feels very New York. I don't know if you've heard it. It's by Jay-Z featuring Alicia Keys. It's
I
so
have
good.
not. I will do that later.
Yeah, it's about New York, and like just it just feels so New York. Like, so one thing I want to do one day is go to New York and listen to that song like when I'm entering. It would just be so dope. So yeah, I loved those two trips in particular.
Okay. So let's see. Moving on to our next question. The next thing I've been thinking about is change because we've all had like a huge change happen to us recently with the pandemic happening. So our lives as a whole have pretty much changed, right?
Mhm.
So change is a big part of our lives, and it always will be. So thinking about that, I was just thinking, what are the some of the most important changes that have happened to you throughout your life?
Well, so two really big ones, I think, are so for me, the move to Texas was just huge in my life because it was the first time I moved to like a completely different area, and it was just it was very different, and it was my first time going to a public school and having to make new friends, and it didn't really like come to me naturally. For the first time I was like really far outside of my comfort zone, and it was good for me because I learned and I adapted a lot because of it, and I understood like what it took to make something of myself, and what the real world was like, and how I was gonna have to do a lot of things that I didn't want to do, but somehow, some way, it was going to be worth it. Because, making new friends is always a struggle for people like me. Well, not so much anymore as it was back then, but making new friends, it's not always easy, but then it ends up being
Right.
worth it. And then, picking classes, it seems like such a big decision, or it seemed like it at the time. And, at the end, it's worth it having to make these big decisions, having to step outside of your comfort zone, even though you don't like it. And so I was sort of forced to do that with the move to Texas. And
Hmm.
another one was so I'm very open about this now, and I wasn't before, but I have alopecia, and so one of the bigger changes in my life was when I just shaved my head off completely. I didn't have any eyebrows, and so it was like a huge self-esteem hit for me, and it was a huge change in my life. But I think I'm better for it, better because of it, because it was such a huge change in my life. But now I understand that like that's not what matters, right? Like what matters is like everyone always tells you what matters is on the inside, but until you go through something like that, you don't really like feel it. And so,
Right.
I just had to go through that. I had to understand why I was important, right? And why I mattered, and it was a lot of learning. Uh, I went through a lot because of it, but I learned a lot, and I feel a lot better about it now. And I'm really grateful for the experience, actually, rather than resenting it like I did for quite a while. But now I'm grateful that I've gone through that because I'm a better person, in my opinion, because of it. I obviously have a long way to go, but I think that definitely made a huge change on my life in a good way. So,
Okay. Yeah, I think the biggest change for me is definitely my move to Texas,
yeah,
because
everybody's moved to Texas is just.
yeah, because I moved. I didn't move from the States. I moved from Saudi Arabia, so it was
Hmm.
a lot bigger of a change for me than it was for you. Because
Yeah.
yeah, because at first, what I think. Well, I think the move to public school was a bigger change for me than the move to Texas, but I guess that was a big part of it because I
I know
didn't
what
get
you
really
mean.
exposed to Texas as much when
Yeah.
I went to private school, because private school, I had familiar things to help me, you know acclimate. My aunt was a teacher there, so she helped me out.
Yeah.
It was easy. We had small classes, so you it's hard not to make friends when you're in a small class. If you don't make friends, you're going to be miserable.
Yeah. Yeah, you really have to.
Yeah, so like yeah, I was friends with like everyone in my class because our class was like 10 students big, right? So
Hmm.
yeah, so that was fine. Eighth grade, breezed past it. Didn't Classes weren't too hard, and then
Hmm.
I moved to public school, and I had to wipe the sleep blank again, and that really threw me off because I didn't want to go to public school. I
Yeah.
I asked my parents not to put me in public school. They didn't listen, obviously, but
But we're friends
yeah,
because of it.
yeah,
So maybe it
yeah.
was a good
So
thing.
yeah, because yeah, so I had to pick my classes. I was really intimidated because I was like, I don't know what honors and AP meant.
Yeah.
I'd never really been exposed to that. So I was like, I'll pick honors bio. I guess I'm good at that. And I dropped out of that. Or I didn't enjoy my time in craft. So I had to pick my own classes. that was really intimidated me because like I was like I don't know how tough honors English would be in regs English. I mentioned this in an earlier episode. Regs English was a bit too slow for
Yeah.
me, but I wasn't anyway. And then the biggest part was connecting to other people because I kind of felt like a foreigner.
Yeah.
Um, like like I would try, but it felt like I wasn't really making friends as much as I was making a bunch of acquaintances.
It's hard because
Uh,
you see, like, you talk to people, maybe you see them in the hallway and they say hi, but they have their own group, right? And it just doesn't feel like you're a part of a group for a really long time,
yeah,
and it's hard to get that.
yeah. Like for the longest time, like I was friendly with people, but I wasn't really
Yeah,
friends with
I know
them.
exactly what you
Right?
mean.
Like you're like hey in the hall, but like do you talk to each
Oh,
other?
yeah,
Not
if you don't
really.
have their phone number, you don't. They probably don't know your last name. Like they just know
Yeah.
you as that one guy from history, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. So like it wasn't until like I met you and then started hanging out with you at the end of like MSA
that
meetings
was
and
fun.
stuff that I really started making. Yeah, and then I slowly started making friends and talking to people a bit more in bio and
Yeah,
stuff. And it started getting easier as it went on, as I got more acclimated.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess yeah, because I guess that what that taught me is that because like before that I always thought sort of that change was good, right? Before I moved here to high
Hmm.
school, because I was like, yeah, change is good, change is healthy, like. But like I thought that for like
Yeah.
minor things, like changing up what you're gonna eat,
Hmm.
stuff like that, because like I didn't really have experience with anything
Yeah.
big.
That was
And then I moved to high school. I'm like, and then for the first few months I'm not enjoying it. I'm miserable. I'm just thinking this is too big of a change. It's not a good one. But I think a big part of what I learned through that is that I guess this is cliched, but change is what you make of
hmm
it. Like it could be a drastic change, and it could be like unless it's like something objectively bad like getting your arm chopped off or something,
Yeah.
uh, but like something like coming to a completely different high school environment. I could have stayed the way I was and sort of been alone and not making friends and kind of been miserable through the rest of my
hmm
high school career. But like I just chose to push things forward, get a little bit more comfortable,
Yeah.
and get involved. And I have friends now that I met freshman, sophomore year of high school that I'm still friends
Yeah.
with here in college that I still talk to every day, and we're going to college together. So
Yeah.
you know,
It's definitely a worthwhile change
yeah,
in both of our lives, I'd say.
yeah,
Because we both, yeah,
yeah,
your first year in public school was ninth grade, right? So same for
yeah,
me. And so we both kind of went through it at the same time and pretty much together. So,
yeah,
well,
yeah, and here we are. Just what is it, like 6 years later, making a podcast.
yes, sir. And that is all the time that we have for that section. Moving on to the guest section, let's cue our beautiful musical intro. Hey everyone, we are back with our guest, Maheen. Maheen, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi guys, I'm Maheen. Um, you know, I'm from Chicago. I grew up with Amaan. Our parents go way back. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm actually really excited. I've never been on a podcast before.
Well, we're happy to have you.
Yeah, we've been only on a podcast. This is our fourth time being on a podcast, actually.
Yeah. Well, this is our sixth time because the first two were failed attempts. But
That is true.
So, Maheen,
Yes.
I know you've traveled to a lot of places, and I wanted to ask, what are some of the most beautiful places that you've been?
Like nature wise or just like in general, like
Just in general.
okay. Off the top of my head, Iceland is the first thing that really just popped in my head. It's beautiful. I saw the Northern Lights. I went with my
that's
friends.
awesome.
It was like we saw glaciers, we saw like these massive waterfalls, and I got to eat shark, which was an interesting. It's 10 out of 10. Don't recommend.
All right.
Basically, what they do is they take the shark and they like bury it in the snow for like 5 years.
Oh.
And then you eat it. So I don't recommend. We had to try it because I was there with my friends, and
I mean, you can say you've tried shark now. That's a story to tell anyone.
I also tried horse, but that's a whole other thing. While I was there, Icelandic horse was like a whole other. I don't even want disgusting. So that's not it.
All right.
There. But it was really beautiful. Like you have like, and we went there in like the dead of February, and we like landed in the middle of a blizzard, and like I have just never seen like anything like it. And you see the black sand beaches and the icebergs, and it was crazy. Yeah.
And you went there for a photography field trip?
I was there for a photography trip.
Yeah, that must have had some great pictures. Then I've seen the pictures and they're incredible.
It's insane. Like we got to go inside glacier. Like it was inside a glacier. It was so
yeah.
I'm using my imagination, but it looks amazing.
Yeah.
The edited pictures are even better.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's important for us to like travel and go different places?
Yeah. I think it just makes you a lot more open-minded. So I don't know. I mean, so basically I grew up outside of the outside of the US. Like I moved when I was like 10. And I grew up in China and Japan, which is really exciting. And I think in the US there's like this like thing where there's like nothing outside the US, and the US is like the greatest country, and you know you have everything here, so why would you ever want to leave? But there's just so many cultures, and seeing like poverty and seeing just the way life is different just from where you are, and different languages. It's so eye-opening, and it makes you so open-minded. And it's also just like, it's such a fun experience. Like traveling is just like so finding food, you know, and you become a lot more, you just see a lot more. And I think it makes you more insightful, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely get that. You get a different perspective, and so now you're not only thinking about where you came from, and you can understand, you know, why people have certain opinions. And at the very least, if you're not going to agree with them, you'll at least understand where they're coming from now.
Exactly. Yeah.
You mentioned that you lived in Japan for a little while. I've always wanted to go to Japan, so tell me a little bit about it.
So yeah, I lived in Japan for about 2 years. I lived in Shibuya, which if you guys know anything about Japan or about Tokyo, it's like that main place where there's this crossing and like a million people try to cross the road at the same time. So I lived like a 10-minute walk away from that. So yeah, I lived in Japan, which was super cool. You know, my dad's job just required him to move a ton. But it was, the food is just amazing.
Really? Amazing. Have you ever had Kobe beef?
Had Kobe beef.
How does it live up to the hype?
It really does. It is so good. But it's hard to find the halal. Like we tried so hard to find the halal, like a halal version of it, and we found it in like our last month of living there, and it was so good. It was so good. Just
And do you like sushi?
okay, so I used to not like sushi when I lived in Japan.
Oh
I did
man.
not like it. Uh, and then I lucked out because last summer, my sister and I decided to just go back to Tokyo because we were in Shanghai and it's like an hour and a half flight. And we're like, let's just go do it. So we went for a couple days, and that was like peak sushi phase. And so we just like it was just sushi all the time, and it was so good.
Awesome.
But I was more like a
Amazing.
ramen udon person.
All right.
Yeah.
Interesting. So aside from, so you've traveled to a lot of places and you probably like have a lot of experiencing different kinds of people and the way that the world is when it's not supposed to be a certain way, right? Like when you see like leaders and the 1% kind of taking everything in the country, and then the rest are just left to not have as much. And so I understand that you want to do something about you want to change the world in some way, right?
Yeah.
So my question is, like, how do you want to change the world, and why is that the way that you want to do it?
Okay, so for some context, so I grew up majority of the time I was overseas. I was in Shanghai, and that's like the financial capital of the world. As like everyone knows, like China is just leading the economy, like in a ton of ways. Like it's up there with the U.S. It's like even better than the U.S. I think right now, and just being there while also seeing the outskirts of Shanghai where people just don't have anything. And I've never seen so much poverty and so much like wealth like in the same place. Like you could go to Shanghai and you could be on one street and it is the richest street like of Shanghai. Like you see like buildings from like the French concession, and you see like lasting influences from other countries, and the street over is just straight poverty. Like it run down. There's trash everywhere. And so growing up, like because I was only like 11, 12 when we or 10, 11 when we moved, so I was pretty young, and that just became kind of like normal for me to see. And then I used to come back here, and I used to just how it was like not like that here. And then I'd go to Pakistan and see like, oh, it's kind of like that there. And then because of all that, so I getting into foreign relations and how other countries interact with each other, how they send help, how they're not helping, and how big of a player the U.S. was in international relations, and especially with things like the UN and other NGOs. So I like when I was like I think like a freshman in high school, I had looked into diplomacy because we had a diplomat come speak at our school. She got to influence foreign policy and help people living in other countries. And that just sounded like exactly what I wanted to do. So that's how I got into diplomacy, and that's what I'm majoring in, inshallah. And I take the foreign exam, I will maybe become a diplomat. So that's kind of towards right now. And basically you kind of take, especially I think it's such a privilege to be like a US citizen, and especially for immigrant kids, like our parents worked so hard for us to even just to just have that passport. And I think like the US sucks so much, and I always like feel so guilty like bashing on the US, especially now during like the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that's happening, because our parents worked so hard for us to get here to have the ability to bash the US. Like it just, so part of me is always like, I don't know if I should be doing this, but at the same time, like I think if you can take that privilege you have with being an American citizen and like make it as so that you can help people like in other countries, like that's just kind of what I want to do, and like that's how I want to implement that, especially with foreign policy and like redirecting aid, making sure aid goes through, and just overseeing affairs in that country and like working with people to help make sure that like everyone is living a livable life. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, that's another
All
thing.
right. And well, speaking of change, so you've moved around a whole lot. So you've experienced a lot of change in your life. So I just want you to talk about a little bit about how one might be able to get used to change or adapt with change, rather.
You know, it okay. I don't think it's so I haven't gotten used to it, and I think it's weird because it happens a lot. Like I've moved like so many times, like whether it's on my own or with my family. Like, you know, for example, like I moved for college alone to Chicago, and then my parents were still in China, and my whole family was in China, and I moved alone. And I would say like that change is different than just like moving. I think if there's like a constant in your life, it makes it a lot easier to adapt. So for me, that constant was always my family, because everywhere I moved, I was with them. And I knew like I'd always have them when I moved. Like I talk about this with my siblings like all the time. Like when we go to like international schools and stuff, like when you move, your first friends are your siblings. Like you go sit with them. It's usually like K through 12 schools. Everyone has lunch at the same time. They're not super big. So there's that. And then, you know, I think if you don't have a constant and, you know, life is changing, I would say like I made my faith like constant, where I was like finding a routine in things, and with praying, and you just have to make a new routine, and you can't let things get you down, and it sucks and it's so hard. It's so hard. But I think if you have the right support system, like my parents were always only a call away, like regardless of what time it was. Like I know, and I love my parents for this, they'd leave their ringer on while they slept. And if I called, they'd always pick up regardless of what time it was there. And then my siblings would do the same. And I think just having a good support system just makes it so much easier.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like it would definitely help.
Yeah.
And how would you say it was? Because so living in quarantine for the past like few months with my parents, I've been thinking like, dude, I gotta move out. Like I gotta get at least a year alone for at some point in my life. So how, like I've heard the experiences, like at first you're like, great, this is awesome, I can live, and after a while you get kind of lonely. Is that really how it goes?
So that's basically, so I haven't lived at home for this long in like maybe 3 years. So I'm losing my mind, safe to say, which is why we're getting this apartment business running and I can get out and leave. But it definitely, it's super exciting in the beginning. And especially me moving to a whole new continent alone, I was like, oh my God. I was like, I am an adult. I was like, I am doing this. I am moving across the world, whatever. And I was like, I don't know. I was just so excited because I'd never been on my own before. And I was 17 and I moved to Chicago alone. And the first 2 weeks, actually, hold on. So what happened is my parents dropped me off. Like it was their last day. They're like saying goodbye. I'm like sitting in my dorm. And it's just like waterworks. Everyone's crying. My dad's crying. My mom's crying. I'm crying. Like it just was, and I was like, why? I've been looking forward to this for so long. And so like, you know, we got over it. And like the first 2 weeks like went by and I was like, okay, like nobody's telling me when to go to sleep. I was like, my mom started yelling at me to do homework. Like, you know, I'm kind of going to the dining hall on my own. Like I'm, you know, I was like, I could get used to this. And then I started missing food from home so bad.
Oh, that's what everyone tells me about the dorms.
It was my mom's food. Like, and I lost it. I like called her. It was like 3 a.m. her time. Like, luckily she was up for Fajr. I was like, listen, you need to tell me how to make something or just something. I was like, I don't know. It's like, Maheen, like you live by Devon. And so Devon is like this, it's like the street in Chicago and it's just all brown and desi, you know. It's like a like resettlement area, basically. Like you go there and kind of move out.
I think my mom's told me about it a few times.
Yeah,
sounds impressive.
It's amazing. And Loyola, like where I go, like the school I go to, is just literally on the same street as Devon. And my mom was like, get up, get on the bus, and go to a restaurant. And I was like, okay. I was like, okay, I can do that. And so I took myself to Devon and I went and got some food. It was good. And I like FaceTimed my mom. I was like sitting alone in a booth on Devon. Like all these people are staring at me. And I'm like on the phone with my mom, like crying, eating like coffee chat. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know why I did this. So, the waiter was like, he just brought me a free samosa. And he was like, are you okay? He was like, do I need to call your parents? I was like, my parents don't live here. I was like, it was really bad, and I was there alone. Anyway, so I kind of got used to not like them not being around as much. And then, like, yeah. So it is like it's fun and super exciting at first, and then it really hits you. I wouldn't say that it was lonely for me just because I like having my own space, like I always have. And I had roommates, so it wasn't that bad. Like I was alone, but like not really. Like I always kind of had people around me.
Well, the roommates weren't always great, I've heard.
Yeah, they really
That's
were.
a story for another time, though.
Yeah, roommates were not always good, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Well, so you studied abroad in Croatia, which I know is a huge thing for you. It was this last semester, unfortunately, cut short because of COVID.
Yeah.
How different was the experience like being alone in Chicago versus because your family moved back to Chicago and then you went to Croatia. So how different was the experience moving to Chicago alone versus going to Croatia alone?
Okay, so the thing with me moving to Croatia, so my parents moved back in like last August. So it's coming up to being a year now. And I had moved to an apartment in Chicago, so I was only like an hour away from home. And I got used to seeing my parents on the weekends or like every other weekend and seeing my family. And, if I wasn't going back to the suburbs, like my siblings would come up and stay with me at my apartment. And so I got used to seeing them. Whereas in Shanghai, it was like an abrupt change. Like it was like seeing them all the time to seeing them never. Whereas this was like seeing them once or twice a month and then seeing them, not for a while. And so because I had done it before, I was like, this isn't that bad. But the thing that scared me about Croatia is I had no idea who was going there with me. Like when I had moved to Loyola, like Chicago was also semi-familiar to me because I grew up like we were not in the city, but we were like close enough where we'd go there sometimes on the weekends or whatever. So it was like still semi-familiar to me, and I have like family friends in the suburbs, and cousins and stuff who I knew would like they'd end up sending me food. Like if I called my mom and stuff, like they'd send me food or they'd pick me up and take me home sometimes. But with Croatia, it's like I've never been to this country before. Mm-hmm. And there's only going to be 10 of us, and I'm going to have like 6 roommates. I was like, I don't know how this is going to work. But the most exciting part of Croatia was it was a diplomacy program. And so that just like the excitement of that just like kept me going. And I did not go through like a homesick phase when I was there. Like granted, I was only there for like 2.5 months. But it just never hit me there, like the kind of homesick, like I need to go home kind of thing. Like it just never happened. Like I was having the time of my life there. Like it was so much fun.
Dang. So it was very different from being alone in Chicago, I assume.
Super different, yeah.
Also probably because you had that reassurance that you were going to be back in Chicago soon. Yeah. So, and speaking of the diplomacy aspect of it, you did tell me you gave a speech at a U.S. embassy, or you talked over there. So tell us about that.
So basically, we got to. It was an entire diplomacy program. So all of my professors, they were all diplomats or U.S. ambassadors or had been diplomats.
That's awesome.
So just like walking into that classroom, like just the amount of respect that I had for the professors was just like out of this world, especially in a country like Croatia, which I honestly had like no background knowledge of before. like has gone through so much with the breakup of like the Balkan areas and like, you know, Yugoslavia and all that kind of stuff. So just like the diplomats there just have been through a lot and they've dealt with a lot. And so when it comes to like classes about like negotiation and crisis and stuff, like that was like the first example was, you know, them talking about their own work. And it's always funny because the next example was always the Israel-Palestine conflict. And so it was super, like, it was exciting for me because I got to speak on behalf of Palestine in front of, you know, these diplomats and people. Awesome. And like, I got to talk with like the EU delegation speaking about so this is like right when Trump's plan came out with Netanyahu about the annexation, about like the peace plan, Middle East peace plan, whatever he came out with in February. Like it was like just when that had come out. And so it was like, we got to do this debate on just which, you know, like why the plan works, like why the plan doesn't work. And like, I was, you know, on behalf of Palestine, it was like, first, it was such an honor, like to even just speak on that issue, especially because it's something I'm super passionate about. And just about how, and just speaking with the EU delegation and the delegation from the US and, you know, other countries in the Middle East and how they feel about it. And it was so cool. It was like the cool thing. Like,
yeah, Amaan, I definitely appreciate good speech and debate, especially on an important topic like this.
Yeah. Definitely. That just sounds like such an incredible experience.
It was just because so I fell into a phase where I was like, I don't know if I should just drop this whole diplomacy thing and go to law school and just make my parents happy and become a lawyer. And I was like, you know, like maybe I should just become a lawyer. I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know if I'm going to make it in the diplomacy world. And then I was like, let me just go try this diplomacy program. And I was like, if I don't like it, doesn't matter. I'll just go be a lawyer. Like I kind of like law. I was like, it's going to work out. And then if I do like it, well then plan set and I'll continue like how I was going before. And I completely fell in love with it. Like it was just everything that I want to be doing when I'm older and I have the certification to do so. And it was insane.
That's incredible. Yeah. So one thing that I'm really interested to get your opinion about is, so you've seen all different kinds of people throughout the world in many different countries, poor, rich, all the different kinds. What do you see in like all these different groups of people that is different, and what's the same?
Okay. Different, I would say the way, like their attitude about life. Comparing it to, okay, like let's take the US.
Yeah.
And, you know, where it's like very, I don't want to say shallow, but it's like you're kind of, I don't know how to put this without like, it's very shallow. Like think about life outside of the town that you grew up in. Yeah. Like that's just it for you.
I know what you mean.
Yeah. Like, you know, you've just never like this is just it and you've accepted it and you have no like, you just don't, and you don't want to change anything and you have no reason to change anything.
Yeah.
It's kind of disconnected in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's kind of like, I don't know. So to me, that just seems very shallow. Like that's just how I would go about it. Whereas like if you were to go to a place like, you know, say like you go to, I'm just going to say China because, you know, that's just a place I've experienced with. But like over there, you see people's like entire lives revolve around like familial values and like life. You can just tell there's just more to life than what there is out there. And they're just a lot more aware of things that are happening. And they've gone through so much. Just like, especially in China, like I'm not even gonna get into it with like the history of China, but like everyone there has gone through so much, and specifically in Shanghai, you have people that have been like kicked out of their homes because of building Shanghai into some like urban, you know, this massive city, and you take away like some of that culture. And I think something that America just like really lacks is like a real kind of culture. Like it's just and I think it's like a pro and con because we are like a melting pot.
Yeah.
of stuff, but like, like when I think of American culture, I think of like suburbs and like,
Hmm.
I don't know, burgers.
Yeah.
That's just what I think of.
Is that what people think of outside of the US?
Like, it's like constant. Whereas with like China, you just have so much culture. Like you have like
Yeah.
just there's so much to do. There's so much to see. Like, and it's not even like it's not so obviously the US isn't like religiously affiliated like at all, and it's like still like a relatively newish country. But you don't have any like big like historical like architecturally important like churches or any of that stuff, or like you don't have like any of that kind of it's just more of like
I noticed that when I traveled to like London and Spain stuff, there's a lot of like London, for a lot of it got bombed and burned down in World War II, but there's still remnants of really old churches and stuff, and also stuff in museums they stole from other countries. But like you do get a sense of like the old is like in the background of what's happening now,
and it's like it's kind of like a don't forget, like it's still there, like you get to see the history, like whereas like here it's like
it's like you have to go to Philadelphia to see this one cracked bell that we have.
Like it's like I just don't know, like, and like I guess it varies for like per city. Like I know in Chicago you have like the two buildings that like didn't burn down in the Chicago fire.
Yeah, those are every time you go past those, I'm pretty sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like my dad would always be like, "You guys know these two buildings?
Two buildings. Like,
these little ones."
Okay, that's it. I've heard this story a million times.
Every single time you pass by it.
I mean, here in Dallas, we just have the place JFK got shot, and that happened like 50 years ago.
Yeah, there's just a little X over there,
It was just like, JFK got shot here, guys.
That's it.
Yeah. So that's like the main difference that I see. But I guess the thing that's the same, or I want to say similar, is how important like their families are. Like although I feel like American families are a little bit more disconnected and like not disconnected, they're more, I feel like lax is the right word. They're just a lot more lax, especially with like, all that kind of stuff. In particular, like it is so, like their family is so important, and having like intergenerational kind of like presence is so important. Like, especially in China, like having your grandparents around, like you need to have your grandparents around. Like it's just, if you don't raise your kid around the grandparents, like it's like this huge, it's like kind of like a taboo kind of thing, because your grandparents are supposed to have like this wise influence over the kids. And like, I don't know, like even when I was little, like I used to hang out with my grandparents all the time. And I guess it's hard with being an immigrant because, sometimes they're back in Pakistan, you don't always get to see them and all that kind of stuff. But like once you're there, just how important a lot of these countries take family life was always really, really cool to see.
Really, that's very interesting.
All right, that's awesome. All right, and just one question we always like to ask our guests, just because it's a fun question that everyone has different answers to. What is something you are an absolute nerd about?
An absolute nerd about? Oh God. Oh, photography. Why did that take me to so long? Okay. Yeah, photography and books. I really like reading. And I love photography. Like Amaan said earlier, like I had gone on a trip for photography, like solely for photography.
I saw your photography account. It's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's probably like, I geek out about new lenses coming out, about like, I like go on YouTube and I watch these like lens reviews and these like camera, like, everyone trying their new cameras and like the different specs and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I love photography.
All right.
Yeah. So what kind of books do you like?
I read a lot of like foo-foo novels, which is like gross. So, like the classic teen fiction, but I also have been getting into the classics. I was telling Amaan earlier, I had just finished 1001 Arabian Nights. And then I'm starting Pride and Prejudice.
I read a lot of classics growing up just because I lived in Saudi, and they didn't really have that many current books in our school library, so I ended up reading a lot of classics and maybe some classics I shouldn't have been reading at my age. Because I read Dracula and it gave me nightmares.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. I also found this YouTube channel that goes over classic literature in a really fun way called Overly Sarcastic Productions. I showed it to Amaan, but you should definitely check them out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they do like summaries and like overviews of the books, but with like they also do history, but like they do it in like with like chibi drawings.
Okay, I will definitely.
It's amazing.
It's definitely something you should check out.
Yeah, what are you guys nerds about? Yeah, I want to know.
We're nerds about lots of stuff.
I want to know.
What in particular?
Let's see. I'm a nerd about books as well. I really like comics and manga. Like anything from DC, Marvel. Recently, yeah, I've read a lot of Miss Marvel recently. Just because I really relate to her as a character. Like me, she brown, at least partially Pakistani and from New Jersey, so I can really relate to that. Yeah. And like she's like on top of that, like she's really nerdy and like she's very much her own person. She's more than just her ethnicity and stuff, which I find is amazing. And I really like the way she's written, so I really enjoyed that series. And then because of that, I actually ended up reading a couple of one of the creators, G. Willow Wilson, who's a revert. She's actually written a couple of fantasy novels. One is called Olive the Unseen, and it's this sort of cyberpunk hacker story with like like Islamic mythical elements thrown in.
That sounds very interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing. And then the other one is The Bird King, which is a fantasy novel that takes place at the end of Muslim Spain.
You guys talked about this on your other podcast.
Yeah. Call back.
Yeah. I added it to the library.
Yeah, definitely do check it out. I read it over on Overdrive, which is pretty much the main way I've been reading these days, because I can't really pop down to the library as often anymore.
Yeah.
So
I read mine.
Yeah, Amaan got a reading light now, so
I know. You sent me a picture of it.
It's so awesome. I love it. I'm reading right now this book. I mentioned it in our last video. It's about this guy. So it's called If at Birth You Don't Succeed. It's about a comedian with cerebral palsy. And so it's just about his story and like the struggles that he went through. And it's very interesting because they're very unique struggles that you don't really hear about. But it's a really good book. It's really inspirational and it's hilarious. Like I was up last night reading it and I have never laughed so much while reading a book because he's a comedian too. And it was just so, I was just sitting, I probably looked so stupid. Like when my parents walked into the room, seeing me like holding a book and just dying in my bed, I'd be like, what are you doing? It's like 3 a.m. Like,
that's been me and my parents. Okay, I don't know what happens. I just like stay up. It's like 4 a.m. like on TikTok. It's so bad. And my dad would wake up for Fudger and he'll come in and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh no." And like I'm like, "When worlds collide," just like a TikTok sound. It's like I'm like doing Fudger and I'm on my phone like watching this. Oh god, like watching frogs, like literally like frogs watching TV. Like why am I I don't know.
Yeah.
I make it a point to put my phone away after a certain time so I don't use it.
I got so into it when I was in Croatia, like just because like the TikTok thing. My friends and I had learned them, and like every time we went out anywhere, like before we left, we'd like film one. And then it became a contest of like who got viral. And then we created like this whole account of like all of our Dubrovnik family, which is like all of my roommates and everyone who was on that program together. And like we went viral, got like 50K, like 70K, like 80K on our videos of us just doing stupid stuff. And it was crazy. So I just got so into it while I was there, and then quarantine, I like have nothing to do. Because I'm interning somewhere, but like the internship's like only on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we like have a call at like 2 at it's like 2 like at 2 p.m. So I'm like, I wake up at like 1:50, like throw a hoodie on, and I'm like, you attend this meeting. And then like I don't do the work until like 1 a.m. when I'm like my prime time and I'm awake for no reason, like when I should be going to sleep. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's definitely gotten a little bit boring.
At least you have something productive going. I just play horror video games now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey man, we have a podcast.
That is true.
Yeah, do you have
Yeah, this is my most productive thing going right now. A lot of my summer stuff got canceled, unfortunately.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
yeah, it's just unfortunate. Like the coronavirus just threw everything off.
Oh yeah.
I was reading about it in like December. I'm like, this is like something. I was like, oh, this is really bad. I was like, it's really unfortunate for
Sucks
those
for
people in China. I was like, I guess, yeah. I mean, less crude, but like, yeah, basically, yeah. It's like, it's bad what's happening in China. And then like 3 months later, I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna stay in my house for the rest of my life, aren't I?
Yeah, it's so weird because I got to see like all my friends that were still in China, like all my family friends and stuff, and like them having to like evacuate and then they finally got to go back. Everything is normal there, and I'm like, we're here. Not things are still not normal. And it was so weird to see that. But yeah, I had to leave like Dubrovnik, like in like an emergency. Like the EU called like an emergency lockdown, and like it was crazy. Like the way I left, it took like 4 days to leave. My flight got canceled like 7 times. The US wasn't letting people in, but then the EU wasn't letting people leave. And the thing with Dubrovnik, if you guys know anything about it, it's like detached from the rest of Croatia. So it's like Dubrovnik, and then it's Bosnia, and then it's the rest of Croatia. And so there's only one airport in Dubrovnik. And some airport and so they locked down all of Dubrovnik the day before we were supposed to leave, and they closed the airport. And we were like, how are we supposed to get home?
Yeah.
And so we called the US embassy, and the lady was like, I don't really know. And not to alarm you guys, but technically you guys are here illegally because your student status got canceled. So when you get to an airport, if you do, make sure you guys like try and claim asylum maybe, or just explain your circumstances. We're like marking you guys in the system. And I was like, don't mark us in the system. I was like, it's fine. We'll figure it out. I was like, we'll figure it out. Don't worry about it.
Not to alarm you. I like how she started with that.
I'm like, thanks, lady. I have a flight tomorrow at 6 a.m. that's canceled, and the EU is going on lockdown, and America is going on lockdown. So
yeah.
I was like, I don't know what to do. And so we had called our advisor, and I was like, hey, I was like, we don't know what to do. And I'm like sobbing at this point. I'm like, of course this happens to us. I was like, now we're here illegally. I was like, is this gonna go on my record? Like, does this mean I can't become a diplomat? I was like, I'm sitting there and I'm going through it. And like, I like call our advisor and I was like, listen, like, how are we supposed to get to the other airport? Because the only other airport is like a 14-hour like car ride away. And you have to go through Bosnia, which is also in the EU. And I was like, the EU borders are closed. And so she was like, good question. I was like, oh, okay. Like, anything else you can give us? And she was like, let me call and find out. And so she took like 4 hours to figure something out. And like, I ended up calling this bus rental company, and we rented ourselves a private bus, and it took us to like, we went on a 10-hour road trip all the way. It ended up being faster because we were on a bus all the way up to Zagreb. We stayed the night at the airport, spent like 14 hours there. And we all got on our flights. Some of their flights got canceled once we got to the airport. Some people got to London and then had to come back because the UK enforced their lockdown. It was crazy.
Yeah, and you might have even caught the virus.
I might have. I never got tested because I wasn't sick enough, but I I think I had it. I think all of us had it. Like,
Well, that's good because now the chances of getting it a second time.
are just really slim, so it's fine.
Yeah, and when you came here, you quarantined for 2 weeks as well. So,
Yeah.
so, we will wait for Omer to reconnect because we're having some technical difficulties, and then we'll probably just do the outro.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And as always, do follow us on Twitter and Instagram at A Cup of Coffee Pod. And be sure to email us if you're interested with any questions or interested in joining the podcast at acupofcoffeepod@gmail.com. And if you have any questions, you can also DM us on Instagram or Twitter.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Maheen, for being here.
Welcome.
And we'll see you guys in the next podcast.